Luke, welcome back, man. How are you?
Yo, I got a mic now.
That's beautiful. The environment's beautiful too.
Thanks, bro.
I
One
love it,
second.
man. So happy to see you again.
I want to be able to get this mic to work, so.
It works well. I mean, I think I hear you from a mic.
All right.
Or does your headphones also have mic?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the one that's picking up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's the mic.
Let me know if the volume's good, because sometimes it gets too loud or too low.
No, the volume's perfect. Can you hear yourself though, or no?
I can't.
Okay.
I can't.
Yeah, like, are you okay with it? Yeah,
Yeah, as long as you could hear me fine.
I can. You're just like
Am I
a
too low?
microsecond that delayed. No, you're perfect.
Let's see. Can it hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Because sometimes the gain you have to kind of like mess around with, but it seems like it's fine now.
Yeah, Luke, welcome back, man. How are you?
Good, bro. I'm glad to be back. Last time was fun, so it's always fun going on podcasts.
Yeah, back to back. That's what's gonna be fun. I'm gonna release this right after your first one, so
Let's go.
that's gonna be fun. Yeah, how are you, man? How's your week been?
Pretty good, dude. Sun just
Yeah,
came out, so can't complain. I think I said the same thing last time, but
yeah.
nice weather, being outside, and I'm starting to realize that like I really enjoy having like intellectual conversations, which is why I started my podcast originally.
Mm-hmm.
But I just find that like whenever you're talking about something that like both people are like engaged in listening to the other person, you seem to have like a lot of like connections that you wouldn't otherwise have. Like a lot of things bottle up in your head. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you start talking for a while, you start to kind of like put pieces together that you wouldn't have otherwise done. So I just think
Mm-hmm.
that's like something that's so valuable that when a lot of people are depressed nowadays, it's like really like, are you actually depressed, or are you just like lacking like kind of like the socialization that humans normally would have gotten? Like,
Right.
for example, like during the sunset, you would have been like chilling by a campfire, just like talking about the day, talking with your family
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. And nowadays, people are just like in their phone, in their phones, in their rooms, on their phone, and just
Yeah.
like not like connecting. And I think that's something that like, regardless of like food and like I just think social connection trumps all of the rest. So
Right.
I love going on
Did
conversations like these, even though it's just online.
Yeah, I love that. Did something connect for you like that this week, or why are you talking about it? Like,
I think it's something that's been on my mind because for a while so for example, for myself, I was in college and I got into like health, and everyone in my college was drinking and partying and staying up late. And I got
yeah.
really into like not eating seed oils and like not drinking and like caring about my light environment stuff. So that took me like out of like the scene that a lot of my friends were in. So I kind of was from the standpoint like, oh, well, if they're like a lot of people told me like, you should cut off your old friends, which is like basically what I did. But I was like isolating myself and I didn't find like a community in college that
I
I
see.
like actually resonated with. So
Mm-hmm.
because of that, I was like pretty like depressed and didn't want to be like I was just like isolating myself. But I don't know, I just feel like even if you're gonna get like if you're gonna care about your health, like you have to remember that like the most important part about health is probably like having a good social life.
Of course. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what makes that's one of the things that makes humans special, right? Our ability to socialize and how complicated it is in a human. And
Yeah.
it's just so necessary. And it's so overlooked nowadays because I feel like most socialization is done online and it's not even real, right? It's through like sending reels through TikTok. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't think that I think Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan, I believe, have like a good clip about like dialogue and how like you learn so much just from like talking.
Yeah.
I'm kind of butchering it, but there's like a clip on YouTube you could look up, and that always kind of resonated with me because I like Joe Rogan style of podcast that was like longer form and kind of unstructured. Because I think a lot of the stuff nowadays is geared towards like short form and just like the podcasts are
Right.
more so just to get clips out of it. And I think
Yeah.
that loses
Yeah.
much of the like actual value, which regardless if you're making any money or not from your podcasts, you're learning so much from like the conversations you have. And I think that every single person you have on your podcast should be someone that you're like interested in. And if you're not interested, like when you sit down to have the conversation, then there's something wrong with like the
Right.
plan that you're going at for the podcast. Because I just think like the value is in the conversation and not trying to like make like ad dollars out of it. And I think when you switch from that style of like actually what you're interested in and passionate about to just like making money, that's when it starts to just become like a TV show or something that's just like
Yeah.
not valuable. And like I don't think that's what podcasts are supposed to be.
No, I totally relate with that because that's one of the things that I most care about the podcast. It's like it's not that I don't care about I think I talked about this with you like a while ago, but it's not that I don't care about my listeners. Um, but everything I create is because I like it and this is what I want to see. Like if I was a listener or like for example, the guests are not chosen or I don't mind what the listeners care about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a guest that's completely out of pocket, like completely different to the guests that have been here on the show. And it's very different to the message about the show and it's different to my audience. But I want to interview that person because I want to have a conversation with this person and I want to record it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't see it as selfish, but that's the way I feel like everyone needs to create. And that's, it's the responsibility of the listener obviously to see how they can read your creation, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense,
I
right?
think the people that perform the best on social media too are the ones who are the most authentic and like only post stuff that they actually like are behind. And I think there's something to be said for like a message that's like somewhat encoded with what you say. So like if you're saying like I've heard Soulbrow say this. I think he might have even said this on my podcast when I had him on, but something along the lines of like
Mhm.
you could just say something as simple as like go outside and like be in the sun, but the way that you phrase it, it kind of like it can have like a hidden message in it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
depending on like your state of mood and like your authenticity, that will like come out. So I think whenever you try to force things, I mean, this is the same thing if like you're in a relationship and or you're trying to get something out of someone, anytime you're like forcing it and not being like true to self, I think that's when like the quality starts to drop. And like whenever that's happening, like I think that you should probably take a step back and being
Hmm.
like what was the original reason why you started creating? And like I think
Right,
too
right.
often it's like how do I monetize? Like how do I just make money from what I'm doing? And I think too often that's the problem versus just like actually thinking about why you started, which was like you wanted to create something, you were probably in a job you didn't like, and you realized that creating content and like helping other people was the way out. And I think that's like where the real value is when everyone's authentic to like what they actually care about. And even if like other people think that it's weird, like who cares? Like there's gonna be some people that are into the
Right,
same things you're into.
right. Yeah. I can't give you like an exact example, but every single time I see this in a creator where they start to worry too much about others more than what they're creating for themselves, everything kind of goes to shit. I can't like I'm trying to think of an example, but
Yeah.
I
I
can't.
mean, for myself, like I still remember um I got into like sleeping and like light diet like pretty early on. I mean, obviously, like I'm only 23, so I can't say like pretty early on, but it was only like a few years ago. But like when
Yeah.
I was in the middle of school, I was like into like, well, first I just cared about my sleep, which is like most people didn't really care about sleep until like I feel like Huberman and Matt Walker and some of those people started to like really like dial in sleep. And I mean, that's how I learned from it as well, was like listening to their podcasts. But I was pretty early on in listening to Huberman and just realizing that like sleep is the ultimate superpower. So I had been sleeping really bad for like probably like 3 to 5 years throughout high school. I would stay up really late. And I also realized that every time I stayed up late, I would stack it with other habits that were bad. So it's normally
Mm,
like you stay up until 2, you smoke weed and you're doing nicotine and you're eating bad food and you're like engaging in porn and other like destructive behaviors. So I realized early on that like nothing really that good happens after like 10. And that's kind of like why I stopped going out and
huh.
kind of like cut off my social life in general. But I still think there's like merit to the fact that like humans are really not supposed to be like up late, like on blue light
Yeah.
screens and stuff. Um, and then yet now I just see like the importance of light diet and like how that's becoming so mainstream as far as like people like being outside more and
Hmm.
realizing that like their jobs are like really like killing them and like causing them to
Shit.
be sick.
I mean, look at you and me right now. We're both recording. outside,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and, like, I didn't even realize like, so it's funny because I realized the aspect of, like, light when it came to sleep because I realized that I got a Whoop, and anyone who's ever worn, like, a sleep
Yeah.
tracker knows that, like, there's just certain things that you start to, like, realize, like, that affect your sleep. So, for example, if I drank alcohol, like 5 beers, and then went to sleep, my sleep score would be, like, very low. Like,
Mhm.
say your heart rate variability is normally, like, 150, mine would be, like, 20 or 50 or something. And
Yeah.
then I realized if I ate, like, a huge meal, like a huge fat meal right before bed, it did the same thing. And then also if I like looked at my phone like without like blue light blockers or just like had overhead lights, my sleep quality would also suffer. So I was like, hey, like light is super important and like it makes so much sense because I would fall asleep like so quick when I would like use candles or just anything like red light or whatever. Um but I didn't realize that like how and I also did like morning sunlight, but I wasn't fully like convinced that like midday sunlight, like I didn't like prioritize that, I guess. And then I heard Jack Cruz on um what's his name, Rick Rubin's podcast with
Mhm.
Huberman, and that like flipped the switch for me where I was like I
Yeah.
need to stop being scared of the sun. And I was in Arizona during like April at the time. So I just like went outside. This was actually just last year, so in like just a year ago. But I have pictures of myself like in like January and February before I had like learned about
Yeah.
the importance of the sun. And then like within 1 month I had like become like so tan. And then ever since then I've just been like because I grew up in the Northeast, so I never like had too much sun and I would always like kind of like burn
Mhm.
um, I think from like seed oils. But then once I realized like, you just go outside and like how good it feels and like you're also getting tan and looking better. Like that's
Yeah.
when like it flipped for me and it was like such an important part of my life where it's like I won't work a job that is going to like harm my health. Like I'm not gonna work inside just because like I make
Mhm.
more money or something. Like that was just something where it was like this is going to be like for the rest of my life something that's like very valuable. So it's cool to see like with the daylight tablet launching
Yeah.
yesterday and then just like in
Shit, amazing.
general how I
Yeah.
think things are trending towards like being outside more, like caring more about our light and diet. And I don't know, it's just like fun to see that like things are kind of trending like in a good direction.
Yeah, hopefully that continues. There's a lot to impact for what you just unpacked from what you just said. I think one of them is like this importance of light environment, something that I see in my family and the people around me. It's like it's taken so for granted because we're just so used to now all of this fake light in our lives, especially, before bed, that, you know, you can't really say no to it until you actually experience wearing blue blockers before bed for like a week or switching those lights for candles. It's like it's a complete switch and such a big game changer. I don't know. I was just thinking about my family when you said that.
Yeah. I mean, beyond just like the physical impact, I think there's like a mental impact to using your
Oh
cell
my god.
phones. Um, like even myself, I'm like pretty like not perfect obviously, but just like last night I decided I was just like not going to go on my phone after sunset, and like the sunset's
Hmm.
pretty late here at like 8 p.m., but like
Whoa,
during that
whoa,
time
whoa.
I spent my time just like reading. Like I ended up going to bed
Hmm.
at like 10:30, but I had such a good night of sleep and like spent the night before bed like reading for 30, like I read like 30 to 50 pages of a book, and then I did some journaling, and then I kind of like planned out like what I wanted to do today. And I think like part of
Hmm.
that, there's a book called Digital Minimalism that talks about this. And it's like, I think the first chapter is it just talks about how humans before like 2007, when I think that's when the iPhone came out, like they had so much more time like with their thoughts and alone to like contemplate stuff and like kind of just think about life, and they were not distracted. And then if you
Hmm.
think about before like technology, because like there was still like computers and stuff then and TV, but if you think about before technology, like humans were always like like waiting in line for something. You're just bored. If you're eating a
Hmm.
meal, you're just bored and you're just eating your meal. And I think that's something where like the connection between like your spirituality and like your like how you spend your time when you're bored. I think those two are like really connected, as far as like that's when like you realize like who you are,
Mm.
and that's when you tend to like have like more of like a sense of purpose. So I think
Yeah.
like just simple things like it's like everything's connected. It's like once you start to care about your health, you start to care about your spirituality, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And like thing
Absolutely.
and there's just like a large difference between people that are like claim that they're healthy, but they're just like only in it for the looks, and then people who are like looking for like a whole like physical, like mental, physical, like everything across the board. I don't know, I just think like that's something that's like I like about like the Twitter sphere that I'm in, is it's
Right.
like it's not just about like what you look like, which I think is like part of like why you can like go on steroids and stuff, but then still like be completely unhealthy and die early.
Mm-hmm.
um so I guess, yeah, I just think like if there's one thing that like is so valuable, it's literally just going off your phone like at night, not for just the sleep, but just for
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like resetting your brain and all that. And then also like in the morning, just like kind of going for a walk and not going on your phone.
Yeah.
It's like even like I always forget like how valuable it is until I do it. And then I'm like, I wasted so much time doing these things. And like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't feel good doing it. And it's like my work is worse. So it's like it's something you
Right.
have to constantly remind yourself of. And I think sometimes like putting in rules in place, like no phone in the bedroom, like no phone when I'm going to take a poop, or I don't know, other random things like that.
Oh, yeah.
They're just so valuable as from the aspect of getting off of your phone. um and I just think that's something that is lost with
Yeah.
modern technology and the ease with which you could always distract yourself.
Yeah. There's a lot of like points I can relate to that. Like, first of all, my mornings have changed because I don't use my phone anymore in the mornings, and I find it like if I do like even scroll for like 30 seconds in the first hour of the day, I become like literally like retarded throughout the whole day. Like I can't even think well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and this before bed thing is something I have to implement because I use my phone before bed because I love to watch South Park before bed. And it's like the thing that most calms me down, and I laugh I just love it so much. But I don't know, it's an interesting point because I've been reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Mm,
I'm finishing it this week, and my brother asked me when I was reading, like, how were they so wisdomful, like in that level 2,000 years ago? And my simple answer was like, they did not have their phone in their pockets all day. That's it, because they have time to think, they have time to ponder, they have time to be bored. I mean, being bored is more than just being bored. It's a state of fucking like creativity
mm.
almost. Um, yeah, it's like a point where you're not distracted and you're just there to receive like messages and shit you've been ignoring. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are really interesting points.
I really liked Meditations, and I think one of the main things that connects kind of what you said with like boredom and stuff is that like you can like some of the main principles of like stoicism, such as like being grateful and being like only controlling what you can control, and like believing in God and believing in nature, and like some of the main principles in that, like I find that like they're like more applicable when you're not on technology and like you're disconnected. So for
Right.
example, like are you really going to be grateful when you're like scrolling social media and like you see someone who's jacked, and then you're like, oh, like I'm not as
Exactly.
like
Mm-hmm.
physically attractive as them, or like seeing some dude with a girl and you're like, oh, like I wish I had that. And I think there's like you're just not going to be grateful when you're doing that, or like watching people fight back and forth. So it's like it's a lot easier to be grateful when it's like you're just sitting in your room and you don't have anything, and you're like, I want more money, I want whatever, I want more power, whatever you want. But it's easy to like be more grateful when you're not on technology and you're not like numbing yourself. And then
Shit.
like I said, like there's just other things in stoicism that only could have been like thought of, I think, when you were bored. Like such a thing as
Right.
like the bread thing, where it's like, oh my god, like look at how the loaf of bread like does whatever, which is like some like famous one, like famous part of the book. And
Mm-hmm.
then also like the one about like waking up in the morning and like being like not wanting to get out of bed. Like those are
Yeah.
things like that. It's like, okay, well, like he could have just got out of bed and like looked at his phone and not even like had that realization.
Yeah.
But it's like you can only have a realization and like smart ideas almost when you're bored. And yeah, it's just like too many people just like go through the motions and don't realize that like
Mm-hmm.
nothing is going to be accomplished by just like rushing through life and like always striving for more and more, because you're never going to be fully satisfied when you get to the end of the road and you realize that the whole time you were just striving for what you could have already been
Right.
satisfied with what you currently have and what you have accomplished in the last few years, but instead you're just like going forward and forward.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something where I don't know, it's valuable like
No,
within
that's
itself, just being bored.
yeah. And that last point was beautiful. What a beautiful intro to the episode, dude. We've touched on so much already, and I want to connect it to something that I wanted to talk about last episode, which was SSRIs. I think you have like an experience there as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's this that you wrote a couple months ago on SSRIs that they're just these drugs that are used to manipulate the uninformed. That is so well said. Like I no, like really I was that made me think for a couple minutes. That was very well said. Yeah, so like how come?
um well, I think one of the main reasons why I said manipulate the uninformed is that I so when I was depressed and I got on them, I was looking for like an answer that like they would
Right.
like solve like my problem, I guess. But I didn't realize that like there's first, I think one of the main things about like the bioenergetic view states that like when you are depressed, there's like a reason why. And then the reason why is that like you're not like producing like energy at the level that you should be.
Mm,
So I've heard like Anabology talk about this. He's a guy on Twitter. And it's like if you actually had enough energy to do everything you wanted to do, like would you be depressed? And I think that's something like people could just ponder is like any
whoa.
anytime you're, and I actually heard Ray Pete say this as well, but it's like depression occurs because you're low energy, so you don't want to go out into the world. So you end up like withdrawing and like saving your energy for like nothing. Like you can only
Huh.
be empathetic to people when you have enough energy to give. So it's like you can't really connect with other people when you have low energy because you feel like every like interactions kind of like taking from you. But when you have enough energy, like you could spill out into all areas of your life, and you could give stuff to the homeless people, and you can like be there for your friends and do your work for yourself and be
Right.
there for your parents and stuff. And
Right.
it doesn't feel like it's like a stress, but it's something that like you can do. So that's like one of the main things is that like I think that the depression meds are not fixing the problem, which is like the problem's like a lack of like energy and like a lack of like basic like health parameters. Like I think when I was depressed, I wasn't sleeping well, I wasn't eating well,
Hmm.
I didn't have good relationships, I had poor habits and stuff. So I think like a lot of the things that like cause depression are like obviously in my opinion like it's like energy related, but then also it's like habits related. Like as long as you're like staying on the right path, you shouldn't feel like too horrible. And like even now, like I think certain people are like more prone to like depressive episodes and like negative thoughts. Like I score really high in like the neuroticism test that Jordan Peterson had, so I know that like I'm more prone. Like I was like extremely high, so I was like that's not too cool. But basically the like neuroticism is supposed to mean that you're more prone to negative thoughts than other people. And
Yeah.
some people can be like, oh my God, like, why would God create me this way? But I more
Mm,
so see it as like people that are more prone to negative thoughts seem to be like more rational than other people because they don't have like the urge to act on their impulses as much. So, and then also like I tend to be more introverted. So I just know that if I go out and have like a bunch of like socialization throughout the day and I don't like take time to like read or like unwind at night, that I'm gonna like feel like more
right.
like tired. Whereas other people might go out and have interactions and they're gonna feel like they just like they gained a bunch of energy. I tend to feel the opposite where like if I go out and like meet people and then have dinner and stuff, I like feel so drained.
Mm,
But that can't be a reason that like you don't interact with anyone at
right.
all. Like
Right.
introversion, like you still need like quality time. And I think that's what, like one of the main reasons I was depressed was just I had friends and then I stopped hanging out with them because I didn't have the same values as them, but then I didn't replace them with anyone else. But to
Hmm.
get back to like specifically with the SRIs, I think like people think there's like some sort of like way out where it's like you could just take this pill and then
And
you'll
that's it.
feel better. but I think like, I mean, not even to go like into serotonin in general, but like I don't really like, I mean, I don't really believe in the serotonin like hypothesis, which basically states that like depression's literally just like low serotonin,
Mm,
and that if you increase your serotonin, you'll feel better. Um, I do think like some of the things about serotonin, as far as it being like something you want to lower completely, like I tend to agree with because I've taken like anti-serotonin drugs, and I tend to feel really social and feel like pretty good because I just want to
mm,
test out and feel like, well, if that's an antidepressant which raises your serotonin and like keeps recycling your serotonin, makes you feel wonderful,
right,
what
right.
would it feel like to do the opposite and completely lower it? And the feeling I get is like kind of the same feeling I would get if I drank like a few coffees, which is like just tends to be like more energized. I would say like a few coffees without like the jitters, which it's like I think if you take like theanine or magnesium or something, you kind of get this like very good like focus without like too much like jitters. And like
Yeah.
obviously like if you keep drinking coffee over a longer period of time, you'll get accustomed to it. But that was kind of how I felt on an anti-serotonin drug. And I don't know, just in general, I just don't think like the antidepressants are fixing like any sort of problem as
Right.
far as like
Mhm,
I think humans are meant to be like feeling good and like euphoric at all times.
mhm.
Like not necessarily like delusional, but like you should have like an overwhelming like just sense of optimism and like be excited to do the work that you're doing. And I think there's things just like a bad job or a bad relationship that can cause like someone to like lower their energy, and then that's why they feel bad, which
Mhm.
is kind of like funny to think about. Is like a lot of the people on Twitter that like to think about like Pete and stuff, they're like, oh my god, like your energy's low because of like diet. But it's like there's like one of the main things that Ray Pete talks about is like a vacation will like can like shift you out of the stress state and towards a state of like abundance and like good health, like just going on a vacation or like moving to somewhere new or moving from somewhere that's raining to somewhere that's
Right,
sunny.
right.
So I think there's so many different ways to like
Yeah,
improve your health and like get out of the depressive state. But one of the main ones I would say is just like switching what you're currently doing, like maybe
of
going
course.
to a new place to work or eating a diet that's more enjoyable, or like there's just so many different things that can like
Yeah.
flip you out of that state. But it just takes like some like encouragement, and I don't know, just kind of it's like hard because you have to like get out of
It
your
takes
room and like
energy.
do stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's why I think like things like coffee or like, I mean, I'm not gonna like advocate for people to take thyroid hormones, but like that was something where it's like if you're anything that can like speed up your metabolism tends to make you feel better. Like even
Mhm.
if you're like really cold and you feel horrible, if you go into a sauna or take a warm shower or warm bath, like you just tend to feel better. So I think if you start to get that feeling like, oh, like if I do this, I feel better, it's like,
You
well, I
should
could
do
just
more
feel
of
this at all times if I just like I don't know, maybe it's a few coffees or maybe it's like changing my diet to eat more carbs or maybe it's going for like a bunch of walks and exercising or something.
that.
But I
Right.
think there's certain things that like you just tend to feel better from. And like if you think about why, it's because like they make you feel more energized. They you tend to feel like more warm and like your heart starts to open up a little bit more and you start to connect with others. And even things like just going in nature, like I mean, I don't think there's anything better for your health than just going out and going for a walk in nature, like
Mhm.
with the sun exposed. Like I just don't think like there's people that are taking antidepressants and then they go inside and sit inside all day and
Mm.
work a job they hate. Like no nothing, even if that drug was going to like do the perfect thing for your physiology, like I don't think that's going to be better than just going for a walk like in
Right.
nature when like that's really like how we're designed to live. So
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much to unpack there again. One of those is like serotonin, but I want to leave that at the end of like the SSRI bit. But like one of the things I do want to talk about, which is interesting, that it's like depression and anxiety are these like two low energetic states, right? Turns out like SSRIs make both of those symptoms or states even worse, right?
yeah.
So could that be that could be that SSRIs are actually like stealing energy from you,
Mm,
or like dropping your energy, or
yeah.
is it just a thing like they just increase serotonin?
I think the idea of the
Whoa, I
SSRIs,
just connected a whoa, that's crazy about serotonin then.
what
That that there's that's like one of the points where you can realize that truly it's not like a happiness hormone at all.
what? What from what?
that these drugs are increasing serotonin, right?
Yeah.
And
I
they're
think the
not making these
idea
states better, huh?
I think the idea of what they do is they, like, recycle serotonin in your brain.
Oh,
So, I
okay.
think there's things like ashwagandha
Yeah,
or maybe other herbs that do something similar, but it's like the serotonin that's in your brain gets recycled, so it's like it doesn't,
it
like,
doesn't okay.
it just it gets keeps getting reused when
Right.
I think your body, like, naturally gets rid of it, and I'm, like, by no means an expert on this subject. I can only experience from, like, how I felt from taking them and just, like, in
Right.
general, like, the knowledge that I've, like, acquired from, like, reading about it and hearing people talk about it, and, like, even just, like, the way that, like, the drugs were developed, which I think I put underneath that post, that you referenced, was that just, like, the incidence of people, like, there's an increase in the risk of committing suicide the month after you start on these drugs. Like,
That is
why would that.
crazy, dude.
Yeah, and then, um, yeah, there was one incident, I think I might have posted it, that someone took, like, they were on, like, antidepressants and they took, like, 20 pills at once, and it's like, if the logic holds true, like, shouldn't the person feel a lot better? But instead, they, like, went into, like, some sort of, like, I'll have to, like, like, pull it up and find it, but I think I might have
Yeah.
made a tweet about it, but they started taking, like, other drugs and, like, entered, like, some sort of psychosis and, like, nearly died. So, I don't know, I just think there's, like, weird things with serotonin, and I think most anxiety is probably caused by stress
Mm.
and as well as depression. So, I think my main theory that, like, I'm kinda coming to nowadays
Yeah.
is that there's just certain things with, like, your diet and, like, blood sugar and stuff where it's, so if you don't eat for a while, like, your blood sugar is, like, naturally just gonna fall because it doesn't your body doesn't have the sugar, and if the sugar's not there, then your body's gonna, like, raise stress hormones to keep your blood sugar in range. So, like, this is obviously smart because if you blood sugar got too low, you would just die. So, like, the body starts to naturally, like, raise, like, stress hormones like cortisol, and then I think, like, glucagon and adrenaline,
Mhm.
which make you feel, like, anxious and, like, stressed. But the reason why is so that you have the energy to, like, go get food,
Yeah.
because, like, if you just ran out of blood sugar that you ate and then you couldn't, like, react, you would just die. Like, this is, like, smart by the body. But the problem is that, like, we're, like, most people are running these systems, like, on a nonstop basis, either
Mhm.
because they're not eating enough and they're dieting, or, like, they're interfering with the product process of, like, blood sugar, for example. So maybe they're eating, like, foods that aren't even, like, providing them with any sugar, like, maybe they're eating no carbs, or, like, they're eating stuff like polyunsaturated fats that tend to, like, slow down the process of, like, metabolizing, carbs and, like, efficiently, like, having, like, energy and stuff. Um, so yeah, that's, like, my main theory is that, like, if you don't have the proper, like, nutrients and, like, that means, like, sugar and, like, on board too, because that's, like, a nutrient that your central nervous system
Right.
and your brain needs. Like, if you don't have those, like, you're going to feel bad because your body is naturally gonna be running on stress instead. So it's like, this is something where, like, it really made sense for me when I started to take T3, which is the active thyroid hormone, because as soon as I took it, I started to feel, like, really, really stressed. And I think I talked about this in the last episode, but I spent, like, 3 days basically feeling like I was like Travis Kelce, like, I was, like, ready to play football at all times. I couldn't
Yeah.
fall
I
asleep,
remember
couldn't do
him.
any work or anything.
Yeah.
And essentially what happens is the thyroid hormone, like, sensitizes your adrenaline, because people that are low thyroid tend to, like, run on adrenaline, because it's like,
Huh.
well, if you didn't have adrenaline and cortisol and, like, the stress hormones to, like, run on, then you would just be, like, sitting around all day, like, doing nothing.
Mhm.
And I think this is what happens to, like, some people when they start to, like, adjust, is that, like, if they start to, like, eat carbs, they actually, like, feel tired and they just
Mhm.
wanna lay around, and it's like the body is so used to running on stress that when it, like, you finally run out of stress,
Whoa.
like, you kinda, like, relax and just don't wanna do anything.
Hmm.
But, like, when you are stressed, you can at least, like, have, like, fuel to run on. So it's very interesting because I think, like, there's sort of, like, a period where it's, like, for myself, when I switched from eating, like, no carbs to carbs, where it was, like, my body just, like, wasn't really, like, that adept at tolerating them, so you just kinda tend to be, like, more, like, lackadaisical, I think, because for, like, years, your body's accustomed to running on stress, like cortisol, and these pathways are, like, ingrained so that, like, when, for example, you fast and you degrade the body's ability to, like, convert thyroid hormones, like, that's like a pathway that gets ingrained, so that even when you provide enough nutrients, your body tends to not like be as adept at the enzymes that are used to create energy. So yeah, I mean, like the body keeps score is like an idea that like I definitely like subscribe to. That like for myself, I spent like 6 months like basically like losing 50 pounds, and I mean, I don't know how many calories that is. It's like 3,500, I think, times
Yeah.
50. So it's like if you think about how many calories you restricted, like how how bad did the body like suffer then? Like how high did the stress hormones go? How low did like the enzymes that require T4 to T3 conversion go? Like the body is going to adapt to the environment. So like that's why I think you should give yourself an abundant environment, like tons of sun, tons of play, tons of like good
Good
food and
food. Yeah.
everything. Um, I'm kind of just going on a tangent now, but
No, I
yeah,
love it.
yeah.
No, those are so many good points. And I was thinking, like, how did you go by like stop taking these SSRIs?
Um, I I only took them for like 3 to 6 months, and I didn't take like a big dose.
Hmm.
So that wasn't like too much of a problem for me. So I think I started taking them like around COVID when I was home. And I
Yeah.
took like a very small dose. So it wasn't like I needed to wean off. But I know like Newt Bro on Twitter has a lot
Yep.
of information for like weaning off SSRIs and like doing natural stuff. So you're not like completely going off the rails. Um, but for myself, in the process of changing my or in the process of starting SSRIs, I started to also like change my diet and like change my sleep and get into like reading and kind of self improvement stuff, like stop watching porn and et cetera, et
Yep.
cetera.
Hmm.
So, I mean, in my opinion, like the SSRIs like didn't like they didn't harm my quality of life when I was on them because I started to do so much other things.
Right.
But I think
Okay.
I kind of
Okay.
had some like residual damage because 90% of the serotonin you make is going to be made in your gut. So I think a lot of people who have high serotonin tend to have like gut issues,
Huh.
and those things kind of go hand in hand. And I think I've kind of been like dealing with like IBS and kind of just like kind of like mild gut issues because one of the theories that Ray Pete has is that like serotonin tends to like slow down your metabolism and it like conserves
Wow.
energy. Um, I think I've written about this before, but when you so like bears in the wild, when they hibernate, they increase their serotonin and they become diabetic. So it's like when your serotonin's up, you tend to use more or use less energy because your body realizes this is like a hibernation state. So why would I burn 5,000 calories worth of food every day if I am trying to hibernate? So I think that's like, and there's people who commented on my post and were like, yeah, we agree with you, but SSRIs are not like a short-term hibernation. Like these things make you hibernate forever because there's people that have taken SSRIs and have like SSRI dysfunction where like the rest of their life they can't um like they
Lay
can't
them off.
get any libido or stuff.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
like I don't know. I just think like I don't know. It's just I didn't have too much of a problem with like getting off of them because I was on such a small dose and I changed my lifestyle at that point. So
Right.
they didn't give me any damage like I thought I didn't think they gave me any damage in the moment, but like when I think about it, it's like gut issues and kind of like low energy for like multiple years after. And yeah,
Hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about serotonin, dude. Why? Can you give us a spiel on why it's not the happy hormone? Because I mean, I don't since forever I've understood that serotonin's the happy hormone. So does my dad. He's done a couple psychedelics, and he always understands that it's because it increases serotonin, which isn't so true, and it makes you happier, right?
yeah.
uh,
Um, I
so
think
forget that, and I don't know, like why isn't it like the happy hormone?
I think with psychedelics, well, I mean, I think one of the best explanations is what I just said with like the
Yeah.
hibernation, where
Hmm.
it's like it increases with hibernation. Do we want to be humans that are hibernating? Like,
No, of
no, we want to
course.
be out, like exploring the world and like literally the exact opposite of hibernating. But I think one of the theories that's interesting is like, so a lot of people think like serotonin is increased with like the LSD trip, which there is something that I believe happens where like when you start taking LSD at like smaller doses, your serotonin drops, and that's when you get like some of the benefits that like so it's weird because I think in Adux Huxley's book, like Doors of Perception, he slightly talks about this, but it's like life seems like more real when you're like in this like LSD trip, and then like
Hmm.
eventually it gets into a place where like everything is kind of like too trippy. And I think the theory that Ray Pete and like some of the other people that before they had this hypothesis of serotonin tend to believe was that like LSD actually lowers your serotonin at like certain dose. And then once you get past that dose, like it starts to increase your serotonin. And that's when you experience the negative side effects,
Whoa.
such as like
Huh.
like hallucinating and like, I don't know, like weird things. So Ray Pete tends to believe that all the benefits that come from like the smaller LSD dose is just that it lowers your serotonin, and that things like coffee and like good experiences and like good health can provide the same exact things. Um, and the idea is that like serotonin is almost like this filter that like it makes life like less real when your serotonin's high, and like the lower your serotonin gets, like the more real like everything looks and like the more real your life becomes. um but I think in general the idea is that serotonin is like pretty similar and synonymous with like stress, and that the idea that it like slows down your metabolism, and also like the thing that like people who have higher serotonin have like gut issues, and like I don't know, in my opinion it's just like it wouldn't be the happiness hormone if it like lowers your dopamine. Like serotonin and dopamine tend to be like
Hmm.
hand in hand. So it's like why would something that increases your serotonin lowers your dopamine, how would that be like something that would make you happy? And I think something that like that's like one of Ray Pete's like biggest like things that people kind of like don't understand is like the whole serotonin thing. So I think if anyone was like interested in that, they should like read some of his articles. Like
Yeah.
I think the one about learned helplessness, like some of the ones about like uncovering like SSRIs, like I think it might be called like the dark truth or something like that. It might be the start of the article. I might be wrong, but just like ex- like there's like evidence that like the beginning of Prozac and like some of these other drugs like they weren't successful, and then they still got rolled out like regardless of like people saying that they shouldn't be going out because they're increasing suicide rates. And I think like in general the idea that like depression can just be like this one neurotransmitter, like it's just low, that's the problem, and there's not even like good ways to measure it. Like if you're depressed, do they measure your serotonin and low your low serotonin, let's take you a drug and increase your serotonin and then test it after and see what it is. Like that's not what's happening. It's literally just like, oh, you have these symptoms, take this drug. It's not even like a like it would be one thing if they're like, okay, let's test your serotonin and see what it is, but they don't even do that. So it's like, in my opinion, it's really just like pseudoscience that they would think that like, I don't know, like it's literally you're not even testing. So how do you know if the dose is getting to the right
Right.
um and I think this is like one of the main reasons why you see a lot of people these days that are like kind of like numb, and like there's literally a known thing. It's like the SSRI stare, where it's like the person is literally like not even like a human. They're just literally like a robot, don't have emotion. And I don't think that's any way to live. And I think I don't want to like act like I'm like
Yeah. Yeah.
completely against them, because like
Hmm.
maybe there's some circumstance where like someone's like SSRI saved my life. It's like, all right, like I don't like I'm not gonna like argue and say that they didn't. I'm just saying that like I don't think the way to treat depression is like with that drug. That's all I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to switch topics a little bit, Luke.
Yeah.
I want to start to talk about, if you're cool with it, like progesterone and pregnenolone.
Hmm.
It's one of the things that I've started to read on Ray's website. I read an article yesterday. I think it was estrogen, pregnenolone, and cancer. I don't know if you've
Hmm.
read that one. Um, Super interesting. Something that I like. One that I don't know so much about is progesterone, and that I do want to touch on a little bit. So, kind of what I've read through your page is that this hormone, I don't want to like label it yet, but it's more of a female hormone than estrogen, right?
Yeah. That's the
Right.
general idea.
Right. How come?
Um, well, I think one of the reasons is that progesterone is like it starts to come out during pregnancy. And I talked about this in the last one, I think, but there's like for each extra child, you tend to live like 1.5 years longer.
Yeah, that's
So
crazy. Hmm.
I think the rise in progesterone when you're pregnant is like pretty protective for various reasons, but I think it's important to realize that progesterone's like present in male and females. And basically what happens is cholesterol gets converted into pregnenolone, and then pregnenolone gets converted into progesterone and DHEA. And progesterone is like actually a precursor for testosterone, which some people don't realize. So like people think like, oh, like progesterone, like it's kind of like it has like the progesterone, so you kind of think it's like only for like women or like only during like pregnancy and stuff. But like if you're a healthy male, you have higher levels of progesterone too. Um, and I think what the idea is that progesterone's like directly like competing with estrogen and lowering estrogen.
Right.
And during menopause, you tend to lose progesterone and estrogen. So people think like, oh, it's just that your estrogen's going down, but it's that your progesterone's also going further down, like in relative comparison to estrogen. Um,
Mm,
so I think like progesterone like shouldn't really necessarily be taken by males because it has like it tends to like oppose testosterone, even though like, so I think it's very interesting because like you can look at like the steroid charts or whatever, and you just like you could look at them and get like a completely like wrong understanding of what happens. Which I think is like it's the main reason why people don't look at them at all, and like why like people like Ray Peter different is because he actually looks at like what's happening like with the endocrines, because he was like studying endocrine, like which basically means like hormones and stuff, which what makes him different is like if you ever like listen to people who are like in the low carb space or like paleo space, it's like they don't even talk about hormones at all. They literally just talk about like
like,
the fat burning or whatever, or like how you're like shredded. But it's like that was what made me so interested, was because I was always interested in increasing my testosterone.
hmm
But then when I learned about like these other hormones like prolactin and parathyroid hormone, and like just like how everything's working on the level that it was, like why was my cholesterol level elevated? Like no one told me when my testosterone was low that it was because my cholesterol wasn't being converted into pregnenolone and then testosterone. But then once I understood that, I was like, oh well, how do I lower my cholesterol so then I support my testosterone? And then proceeded to do that, and my testosterone
right.
went from whatever to whatever it is now, like 400 to 900. So
That's
um
beautiful.
but yeah, I think to get back to what I was saying about the charts is that like if you look up like the cholesterol, the pregnenolone, the testosterone, to DHT, to et cetera, like there's like a certain idea that they like will always go down like the funnel, for example. So like cholesterol can go into progesterone, and then I'm pretty sure progesterone can go into like cortisol or something like that. And then DHEA can go into estrogen, or DHEA can go into testosterone and stuff like that. So the idea is that like these just like naturally like go into certain pathways. But
Mm,
what Ray Pete said is that it's basically like a rope, so that like DHEA would either get pulled by estrogen or testosterone based on like what
but well,
is
okay.
what is actually needed, I guess.
Hmm.
And then other things like progesterone tends to oppose estrogen. So like if you take progesterone and DHEA together, then DHEA is going to be more likely to convert into a testosterone pathway than it is a estrogen pathway. Or if you take like pregnenolone and DHEA together, then the pregnenolone is that could either convert into progesterone. DHEA is going to be more likely to convert into DHEA. So I think there's like certain like interesting things that go on that people don't necessarily understand, which is why they don't talk about them. But I think the general idea that progesterone opposes estrogen, progesterone should be taking, I believe, in the luteal phase for women because they don't want it to interfere with their cycle. Because I'm pretty sure progesterone is like it's like a contraceptive, like it prevents pregnancy, I believe.
Okay.
Um, and then one of the other ideas is that like progesterone in men tends to like if you have too high of a progesterone level, it tends to like shut down testosterone production and might like stop your facial hair, like shrink your
Yeah.
penis, like weird stuff like that. So it's like
Hmm.
males probably don't want to be taking this because like even though you feel good, you like I don't know, just for me, like I'm a 23-year-old male. Do I want my penis shrinking and like okay, it's like penis shrinking here, like feeling good here. It's like I rather have a big penis and feel bad almost. I'm just kind of joking around, but I think like the only use case for progesterone in men would really be like if you're sick or like
Right.
say you're gonna go
Or
through
like,
like
okay, okay.
Like, say
Yeah,
you're gonna
sorry.
go through like a airport. Like I've done this before. It's like I know the airport's gonna be really stressful, and I tend to like when I'm like getting my bag checked and like going through like EMF and all that, and like on the plane and like probably fasting too because I don't want to eat while I'm in the microwave
Mhm.
plane. That like I'll tend to be like more stressed. So
Of
I mean,
course.
I could just take pregnenolone, but like maybe you take a little bit of progesterone and you tend to feel a lot better and don't have to worry about the stress. Um, or if you're like very sick, because progesterone tends to like just like help with all sorts of functions as far as like the gut and like opposing estrogen, which is stressful. So it can like help you sleep better. It can help you be more relaxed. It tends to like improve like the thyroid hormone conversion. So it's just like basically like an energy promoter and like stabilizer of like all sort of bodily functions. But I think pregnenolone is probably like more of like the male version where it's like if you're a male, you probably want to take pregnenolone, and if you're a woman, you probably want to take progesterone.
Yeah.
And also like I tend to think like as long as your hormones are being produced, which is like as long as you're under 30, your hormones are going to be like in place, like
Mhm.
they should be working
Mhm.
properly. And I think every year after 30, like there's like a certain like maybe like 1 to 5% decrease in like pregnenolone DHEA, which is like what causes aging and stuff. So like if you're like 60 years old and you're kind of like yeah, you could be healthy without taking these, but you might see like a very like stark increase if you're taking pregnenolone and
Right.
DHEA when you're 60 years old and your production's naturally down. But I think the most important thing to realize is that like proper thyroid production like makes sure that these hormones are in the right place. So I've like tinkered around with taking like pregnenolone DHA, and I tinkered around with taking some progesterone, and like I've never felt better than when I'm just like my thyroid's working properly. Like I can take like, and also pregnenolone has really bad oral availability anyways, but like
Okay.
say I took like 150 milligrams of of pregnenolone, and normally the body converts 30 to 50 per day. Maybe I'm only getting like 5 milligrams of that, or I don't even really know what the number is. But my point is just that like I feel way better than it when I just have proper thyroid production,
Okay.
which like for me would just be like a temperature that's high. Like I'm not overthinking things. I have the energy to do my work I want to do, and like I'm feeling like confident and like not depressed or anxious or anything like that.
Right. Right.
So, and like how do you get there? Maybe like changing your diet, maybe incorporating some coffee. Maybe you have to experiment with thyroid hormones because for 5 to 10 years you were eating horrible food, so you fasted a lot, so your thyroid is down. So
Yeah. Like,
I think the thyroid, that's why like it's so important, is that it produces the hormones that will then make you feel good. And like trying to mess around with the hormones is almost like it's like a reverse. Like why would you try to? It's like for people that want to increase their testosterone, but your cholesterol is 300, just lower your cholesterol and then your testosterone will naturally rise. And it's the same thing with like other things like SHBG. It's like if you want your free test to be higher, well, why would you shoot up tests when you could just lower your SHBG? And
create.
things
Yeah.
like I think the idea is that pregnenolone, when you take it, it starts to make more pregnenolone, so it's not the same as testosterone. So like if you take testosterone, then you shut down your own production
Yep.
because it's like at the pituitary level, you're shutting it down. And pregnenolone, it doesn't shut down your own body's ability to make pregnenolone, which is interesting. But overall, I just think like the thyroid's going to be the most like bang for your buck as far as like if your thyroid's not there, you could still take the other hormones and maybe like they're high enough. But like this is like the systemic problem is that you're not like the thyroid's making everything work properly from the sex hormones to um like having like healthy like bowel movements and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
I think like trying to like back up the hormones into the proper way without getting the thyroid there is like kind of like stupid in my opinion. Like it's just like a fool's idea to try to be like, oh well, I feel horrible and my diet sucks and I'm eating all these things that are like impairing my body's ability to make energy, but I'm just gonna take like progesterone and that's gonna like solve my issue. Like I don't think that's not my view at all.
Yeah. This is such a crazy and interesting rabbit hole. I'm so happy I got into it, and
Yeah,
I'm excited to keep going through it. So something you said about like DHEA converting to estrogen or testosterone, uh, for what the body would need. I feel like I feel like that's true, but then why would we cease like cases of men, most of them being super high estrogen and low testosterone? Like, wouldn't it be just like an environmental problem? Like, does
Um,
does that question make sense? Wouldn't like the environment dictate if DHEA is going to like convert into estrogen and testosterone?
yeah. So my point,
Environment and habits,
yeah.
of
So
course.
my point was that like if you so you're in a current state when you take the hormone like DHEA. So DHEA can either go into testosterone or it can go into estrogen.
Okay.
And like say you were like 25 to 30% body fat and
Yeah. Okay.
you're like are prone to aromatize like or I might have been mistaken. I might need to look this up because I don't know if DHEA actually goes into estrogen or if it just does that through testosterone. Um,
Huh.
let me look it up one
Yeah. Of
second.
course. Of course.
Let's see.
Yeah. That made me think.
I might have messed that up.
Dude, the noises of the birds in your background is beautiful.
And also the other thing is that like the charts are pretty bad. Okay, so this is what I believe it is actually is that DHEA goes into androstenedione and then goes into testosterone, and
Yeah.
then testosterone can aromatize. So
Okay.
I think
Okay.
my point
Okay.
was more so that if you're taking DHEA without like progesterone, which so progesterone lowers your estrogen naturally. So like if you take progesterone with DHEA, your DHEA that converts into testosterone would be more likely to go into DHT than estrogen.
Oh, I see.
So like if you're more prone to be estrogenic and you're taking DHEA, just
Yeah.
DHEA, there's a risk that the DHEA just goes into testosterone and then aromatizes, which you wouldn't want the higher estrogen,
Okay.
which is like the same thing where if you took testosterone, you're like people think like, oh, you just need higher tests. And it's like, well, what happens if the test is just aromatizing? Like
Right.
you want the
Right. Right.
test to
Right.
go into DHT, which DHT is more potent than testosterone and then can't be aromatized too. So that's what I think of like as far as like the goal of like if you were going to take DHEA, you might want to take it with pregnenolone or progesterone, I believe, because those tend to block estrogen and stress, which would cause the DHEA to go into test and then estrogen.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for clearing that one up.
Yeah.
Okay. So pregnenolone. That's the mother of all hormones. No.
Yeah. I think that's what it's known as.
Yeah. Why is that? I also read that from Pete. Besides you. Yeah.
I think it's like I said, but it's like the cholesterol goes into pregnenolone and then
In there.
pregnenolone can go
Right.
into any of the other hormones. And then I think there was once like the idea that pregnenolone didn't have any action of itself, but if anyone's taken pregnenolone, they kind of can like feel the action. Um, so I think pregnenolone tends to like lower stress and like lower the hormones that initiate other stress hormones. So I think like ACH or ACTH or something like that. So and then also just like it operates like it's pretty saturated in the brain. Like the brain tends to have more pregnenolone. But the idea is that
Mm.
like it's the mother of all hormones because it can convert into any of the other hormones.
Right.
So I feel like I don't have much more to say on it. Like I've already like mentioned like
Yeah.
various uses for it.
No,
But
I know there is a point that I think you haven't mentioned that I'm very curious on, which I read it from you that it flips on the GABA system, right?
hmm.
What does that entail?
I believe there's like a pathway with I don't know where it is, but that it leads to allopregnenolone,
Yeah.
which allopregnenolone tends to be like the most potent like GABA stimulus. So people that tend to be like higher testosterone and higher DHT tend to have more GABA. And like if you take like theanine or glycine or taurine or magnesium or
Hmm.
magnolia bark, then you know like how good like GABA is,
Yeah.
which basically it's like some like potent relaxation stimulus. And I don't know what the pathway is, but I'm pretty sure allopregnenolone is like the most potent form of GABA that you can like stimulate in the body.
Okay. Wow.
So I'll have to like look up like what the conversion is, but yeah, LOP pregnenolone is pretty potent.
Yeah. Another point you mentioned with pregnenolone is that it antagonizes serotonin,
Mm.
right? What does that mean?
Did I say that in a tweet?
You said it in a tweet. And you also mentioned it like at the start when we were talking about serotonin.
Mm. I think the idea is that like anything that is stressful is going to turn on like certain systems. So this is like something that like I really like about Ray Pete is
Uh,
it's like the prolactin, estrogen, serotonin, like parathyroid hormone, or I don't know, serotonin I already said, but basically all the systems like work in tandem. So
mm-hmm.
like I'm pretty sure if you like have prior prolactin, you're going to have like higher like serotonin or like other things like that, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
it's like none of the stress systems like work like on their own, like they're all like in tandem.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is like something like pregnenolone that would lower cortisol and like make you better at producing energy is going to lower your serotonin. Whereas something that
Okay,
like
I see.
something like an antidepressant is going to do the exact
Okay.
opposite and increase
Mm-hmm.
your stress and probably increase your serotonin, estrogen, and prolactin and lower your energy production. So it's just the idea that like these things like go in tandem and not like it's just one hormone like working on it like by
Mm-hmm.
itself. Like it's like the whole picture is like these things all work together. So it's like you're producing energy effectively, which requires enough cholesterol, it requires enough T3, it requires enough vitamin A. Um, and you need to be like making those hormones and then making sure that the testosterone that eventually gets converted is not going into estrogen, it's going into DHT. And there's certain things that would like lead that to happen. And then the same thing with like food, where it's like you intake food, but then you don't want the food to just like the glucose to go down a certain pathway and convert into lactate, which
Right.
would be like more of like the cancer, like diabetes type metabolism. You want it to go down the pathway that runs it through the entire metabolic pathway so that it like converts into carbon dioxide. So it's like the idea that like these things are not like interdependent. So it's like something like pregnenolone that like does things like help your gut, does things like lower stress, does things like work in the brain to make higher level emotions, thought. Like it's just like it's very interesting that like it would work on certain like multiple different pathways. So that's the idea that it would lower serotonin because it's
Right.
working across the board. It's not like it's just one thing that's happening. And that's I think a lot of people get mistaken is they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I just need to do this one thing. It's like, no, the whole body is like a
Mm-hmm.
system. So you want to be supporting it with like everything that is going to make you feel better and like make you better at producing energy. It's not just like, oh, I have high cortisol. That's the end of the story. It's like there's certain things that are in place that you need to improve upon so that like the entire energy process is better.
Yeah, I feel like one of the biggest takeaways from this series has been that I need to test my thyroid as soon as possible and started like test desiccated thyroid. I really want to get into that. That sounds so I mean your what you've talked about in these two episodes and in your Twitter, I mean it makes me just so excited to get into that.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
the basic way to start is literally just so when you wake up, just check your temperature and pulse. And
Mhm.
then if you go eat breakfast, check your temperature and pulse like 30 minutes after. So it's like after the food is digested. And what I found with myself is that even if I ran like a 98 temperature upon waking, if I ate food, I would actually lower my temperature. So the
Okay.
idea that Ray Pete ran into was that if you wake up with like a 98 and then you eat food and you lower to a 97.5, like there's things like stress that can increase your temperature. So like
Working
through the
out?
night, through the night,
No.
what's up?
No, my bad. Sorry for interrupting.
You're good. So
Yeah.
like so basically the reason why you wake up and your temperature is just not normal is because your thyroid and like your metabolism goes down overnight because you're dark, you're not eating any food, you're going a long period of time. It's almost like a mini like I don't want to say mini hibernation because that's not what it should be. It should be like a restful sleep. But
Mhm.
basically like your body realizes that like you're not like fully awake. So it's tends to slow down your metabolism. So it's normal to have like zero point 0.8 like waking up around 97.8. But then when you go eat food, your body should be like, okay, there's like enough carbohydrate here. Let's ramp it back up to
Mhm.
98.6. But what many people will find is that they wake up with like a 97.5 to a 98 and then they eat food and their temperature goes down. So that
Mm-hmm.
means that there was like very high stress hormones there. So then the food like actually lowered the stress hormones, but
Oh, okay.
it didn't increase the metabolic rate. The metabolic rate actually went down after, because the food was just the stress was just propping up the temperature. So you weren't actually like that high metabolically sleeping. It was literally
Okay.
just like
Yeah.
um the the stress. So I think that's one of the most basic ways. And then also just like say it's 2 or 3 p.m., like checking your temperature and seeing what it is after like lunch or something. And if the temperature is like below 98, then you're like, why is it below? Um, and I think the most basic way to like get started is like to just try with T3, because a natural desiccated thyroid products can have T4 and T3, and
So just okay.
T4 takes 2 weeks, like 2 to 5 weeks to like fully like saturate into your like thyroid or whatever into your
Whoa.
body. So something like T3, it has like a half life of like I think 4 hours, or basically
Right.
it's like
Okay.
metabolically active for like a day.
Mm-hmm.
So you could take T3 today and then not take it tomorrow, and like nothing will happen. But if you
Okay.
take T4 today and then you don't want to take it tomorrow, like you're impacting your own production to take it. So that's why you should always like start with T3, just so that you like
Hmm.
understand like
Yeah.
how it reacts to you and stuff, because sometimes one dose of T3 can like shift you out of the stress state. Like that's what several people have like reported, that like if you just take T3 and like you feel good, you might actually just get you out of like the low thyroid state forever.
Mm-hmm.
But other people, so the interesting thing is like the T4 is like not metabolically active. And if you're not good at converting T4 into T3, like you could just take T4 and you will feel like nothing, or you'll feel worse. So like
Hmm.
it's like what you actually want is the active thyroid hormone T3, and like you probably don't have a problem with with actually making T4. Your problem is that you're not converting T4 into T3 if you're low
Yeah.
thyroid.
Yeah. That was
So
huge from last episode. Yeah.
so it's like if you just took T3, then it might solve your issue and give you the actual thyroid hormone that you need. But it's not that you're like not producing thyroid hormone, it's just that you need more of the active. So I think like if you can just get pure T3, that would obviously be like that's like the beginning protocol, is like work your way up, and like your body produces 3 to 4 micrograms of T3 per hour. So you wouldn't want to startle your body
Mm-hmm.
and not eat food and then take 8 micrograms like I did, because your body's going to be like for 3 days like what just happened, like
Yeah.
I'm only supposed to make thyroid when I eat, and you just dropped 2 hours worth into 1 hour. um but yeah, so it's definitely something that like you start with like maybe even as low as like 1 microgram and work your way up.
Yeah.
um and like natural desiccated thyroid I think is like very useful, but it should probably only be used after you've like experimented
With
like
T3.
with just T3, just to
Okay.
see like how it makes you feel. And like I know in Mexico you could literally just go to like the pharmacy I think and buy
Mm-hmm.
it. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'll let you know how that goes. And Luke,
yeah.
to end the series off, and I mean, obviously, there's going to be a part 3, but I'm not letting that happen if it's not on, if it's not IRL. Um, but for the last question that I feel you're going to love is from what you've studied and you work with, which you already talked about in these 2 episodes, like what has that taught you like most about the world?
Mm.
Does that make sense? Does that question make sense?
So you're saying like from what I like work on and what I do, like what have I learned from it? Like learned about the
Yes.
world?
Yes, exactly.
Mm, honestly, this is like I don't know if it's that relevant, but I feel like something I've just been toying with is just the idea that like action always trumps thought. So
Mm,
I was just thinking about this today, but it's like if you ever have a problem, like it's very I'm at least I'm prone to this, where it's like you think about the problem like like before bed, and as you go about your day, you're
yeah.
like, hey, like I want more money, or like I want X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But the thinking about it doesn't really like give you any sort of value. So like it kind of just makes it like further and further from being a reality.
Hmm.
So I think the quicker you can turn something from like I don't think it's necessarily bad to like want things. Like some people are like,
No.
"Oh, you should just like be like a monk and like not want worldly things." I think it shouldn't be that way, or I mean, it could be if you want, but just it shouldn't be that required. but
Yeah.
instead just convert that into like how is that like an actionable thing you can take. Because I think the tendency for myself and like maybe other people that are similar to me is to think about like what you're doing and like how you can best do it. But the easiest way that I've thought, or the easiest way I've learned, is through like experiment. So like
Of
I think
course.
like there's like an idea, it's like the only way you really learn things is through like experience. But um yeah, I think that's true for health as much as it's true for just like anything in life that you want, that
Hmm.
you're never going to learn how to do it from just like the concepts in your head. Like maybe you're you mentally like understand the concept, but is your body and like your whole being going to like react properly if you have never fully experienced something? Like I don't think so. So I think it should always be like action over like thought, and like the quicker you can like have an idea and then try to like jump on it, the probably the better, as far as um not being like so scared that like the fear of failure, the fear of success, or
Hmm.
any sort of fears that you have, like the quicker you can just get those over with, the quicker you can learn. So
Right. Did something like specifically made you think about that issue or like ponder about this?
um I think just like with business, like with where I'm at,
Of
and
course.
just how, like I said, like for multiple years I was always like thinking, well, I was also reading The Way of the Superior Man last night, and I was
Mm.
just thinking about how I think the way the book starts is probably like, this is another tangent, but I think the way a book starts like should be like, if you're not reading the book and like wanting to underline every single thing, or like everything's not hitting home, like you're reading the wrong book, because
Mm.
there's another book that's going to be like hitting home for you that well.
Hmm.
And I had already read the book, but I just opened up the book last night, and I think the first part just talks about like, if you like whatever you want to do, like you need to be spending an hour doing it now. Like
Yeah.
why do you think that like tomorrow is going to be any different than today? Like whatever like in your heart like you really need to be doing, like you need to be doing that today for an hour, and not using like your family or your work or any other excuse. And then be
Right.
prepared for the fact that maybe you're really just not up for the creative challenge that like entails. So I think, yeah, like that's a side note, but I think like the same
That's a
thing
good one.
for, I think it's the same thing for like, I started reading Ray Peat's from PMS to Menopause, and like from the first like word that he like spoke, I was like this is like one way to start a book, because I think he just talks about how like the medical establishment is like messed up. You could probably look it up after, but
Hmm.
it's like I think there's like merit to the fact that like if you're not opening up the book and like really fired up, there's probably something wrong. So maybe next time you go to a bookstore, you could try this, just to like go in, read the first pages, and if it's not
Yeah.
hitting, like you don't buy the book. Um, but yeah, that's where I got it. It was just last night, and how like he was just saying like don't waste time, because the longer that you don't take action, like the less clarity you're going to have with your purpose. Like your purpose is
Hmm.
going to be found like in the action, but the
Hmm.
longer you take to act, like the lower your clarity of purpose is going to be. And I think
Yeah.
that's been true for me, as far as like I knew I wanted to start posting online. I didn't post for like 2 to 3 years while I was doing all the health stuff. And then I
Mm.
finally posted, and I was like, I should have been doing this all along. Like, why was
Hmm.
I so scared to do it? So I think like whenever you kind of like get this inkling that like you should be doing something, like
Do
don't
it.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
like don't put it away and just like start doing it now.
Dude, what a beautiful way to like end this the episode.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thanks for
Beautiful,
having me
Luke.
on, bro.
No, man, thank you so much. These two episodes were great. I'm excited to release them, and I really appreciate the opportunity to for you to take time with me.
It was so much fun, Alfonso.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah.